The Huawei Nova 9 makes a major jump from Kirin chipsets to Qualcomm Snapdragon. They also moved down to a 50-megapixel camera from 64-megapixel in the Nova 8. So why did Huawei make all these moves? Let's take a look at why we think Huawei is taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So let's talk design. First of all, they have definitely addressed the fingerprint magnet issue with this beautiful matte back. It now weighs 186 grams, slightly heavier than the previous model, but this might have to do with an increase in battery size. It features a very similar body construction to the Nova 8 with an over-the-edge curved display and aluminium side rails, complemented by a hint of a new matte finish on the top and bottom of the phone. We have the starry blue color here, but if you want to go classic, it also comes in black. 5G, however, will not be available in the Nova 9 or possibly for some models to come. Speaking on stage at the launch event, Consumer Business CEO Richard Yu said, "5G phones are beyond our reach and we have to go with 4G by removing the module from our chip design." A bold choice by Huawei, but possibly the right one moving forward. Just like before, the Nova 9 features a 6.57-inch OLED display, but with a little extra. 120Hz dynamic refresh rate is now available straight out of the box to balance smoothness and battery life. There are also 2 settings of high at 120Hz and standard at 60Hz to choose from, depending what your priorities are. It's comfortable to view in daylight considering it's still very bright even at 60%. The in-display fingerprint sensor is fast and accurate, just like its predecessor. While the mono speaker construction is decently loud, we were hoping for dual speakers in this version, or at the very least, it could have used the earpiece for a second audio output. This rendition also doesn't come with an audio jack. But now, let's move on to cameras. It includes an 8-megapixel ultra-wide, a 2-megapixel depth sensor, a 2-megapixel macro lens, and then a 32-megapixel selfie camera on the front. It features a newly designed quad-array camera construction with what Huawei calls a nebula ring around the 50-megapixel main camera. In a world where bigger is often said to be better, you may be surprised to see a 50-megapixel wide lens being a step down from the 64-megapixel of the previous model. But we figured this is most likely to enhance its low-light performance. The 8-megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide is also f0.2 lower in aperture than the previous model. Huawei has now implemented an ultra-wide-angle anti-distortion algorithm to keep straight lines intact without having the edges of the frame displaying a warped effect. Personally, we feel this is by far the best update here within the new features brought to the Nova 9, especially if you take a lot of architecture photos. Something we definitely appreciate is the noticeable differences in picture quality with their latest XD Fusion image engine and Huawei's RYYB color science. This retains highlights and shadows much cleaner in images with less processing in clothing textures, which used to be an issue with the Nova 8. The shutter speed still lags when taking moving objects, but this depends on light settings and your subject. In other words, it's still not ideal for pets. AI function is now easier to switch on or off, having it built into the camera UI. The AI is mostly accurate when guessing what the camera is pointed at, such as text, humans, animals, landscape, etc. It does take a second to process before showing you the final result, while it works to raise the exposure in certain darker parts of the image while smoothing out the harsh highlights, at the same time creating a decent fall-off for depth of field when held close to an object. There's also high-res mode available now, but this is suitable for still objects only, since it will take approximately 3 seconds before compositing a final output. It seems to work by layering multiple images into one to capture detail even when zoomed in at 300%. This might even be suitable for product photography, given you have a tripod or mount to attach the phone to, as the final output might be inconsistent when using handheld. The 32-megapixel camera is still one of the best we've tested, both in stills and video mode, that shoots up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. Overall, the camera user experience is much improved with clearer suggestions and directions for using the different modes. Small text that appear in the camera UI, like when using the super macro mode, will inform you of the minimum distance between the lens and the subject. It's these little improvements that go a long way. We have high expectations for its video mode, which shoots up to 4K at 30 frames per second and is capable of high frame rates up to 960 frames per second at 720p. The 50 megapixel sensor has an ISO range up to a whopping 409,600. While we don't think there would be many who would ever need that much for it to be usable, it's there and it's an impressive feat nonetheless. Vlog mode is now in the main feature of the camera UI because it allows you to shoot using both the 50 megapixel main camera and the 32 megapixel selfie camera simultaneously. This really goes to show how Huawei is targeting camera users with the Nova models and their camera focus builds, since the rest of the updates in the newer model are subtle. The stabilization with gyro EIS is as great as ever. It does well managing jitter and shaky movements while walking or in a car. You get great dynamic range when shooting outdoors, particularly with capturing the sky and harsh sunlight without losing detail on your focus point. Low light performance in video mode, on the other hand, has not improved as much compared to photos. Using the 50 megapixel sensor might have helped to decrease some noise or grain with a smaller pixel density, but not by much, and you'll still require decent lighting when shooting indoors. We would love to see Huawei work on a night mode for video, since they do pretty well in still images already. Probably an AI feature that works in video mode so that it can help process footage cleaner without needing extra processing power. Who knows? The Nova 9 runs on an octa-core Snapdragon 778G Adreno 643L with 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs or 256 gigs of storage. The best scores we've gotten on our Geekbench test were 785 for single core and 2973 for multi-core. This is a good leap from the Nova 8, which scored only 568 for single core and 1906 for multi-core in our last test. Results were close to the Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra with an Exynos 990. We believe Huawei could have gone with this jump from a Kirin chipset to a Qualcomm Snapdragon for a few reasons. Number one, appease the US government by working with an American company. Number two, a chip shortage in their production plant. Or they can't do 5G because 5G is apparently patented by an American company. Again, these are good improvements to optimize all of the new features brought to the Nova 9, and we will likely see it improve further in the coming models. The gaming experience is definitely smoother at 120Hz, but as always, the pitfall here is having some games that might not yet be updated for HarmonyOS 2.0. A quick disclaimer here, we have yet to experience the full potential of HarmonyOS as we don't have other Huawei devices to test their ecosystem at the moment. It still feels unfamiliar to typical Android users that are used to Google apps and services. Nevertheless, we are glad to see all of the local apps instantly recognized and automatically installed when setting up the phone and after selecting your country or region, though it does come pretty bloated and you may want to do a bit of a spring clean. The newly announced built-in apps such as Pedal Clip Video Editor and Remote Shutter function with Smartwatch 3 is now available, and their video conferencing app MeTime now supports up to 12 people in a call. Last but not least, we're happy to see a bigger battery at 4300 mAh, which comes with a 66-watt super fast charger which takes you from 0 to 100 in 38 minutes. In conclusion, we appreciate what Huawei has done with the Nova 9. Subtle improvements while addressing some of the flaws of the previous model, not fearing to take things down a few notches while appeasing certain aspects, which could improve overall usability. Kind of like knowing how to double down on your strengths instead of focusing too much on your weaknesses, or in this case, focusing on the user experience and improving that without giving up technical ingenuity. Tell us what you think about Nova 9 and we'll see you at the next one.